Four Corners region is the largest reservation in the United States. To us, Navajo Nation. To the Dene, Deneta. In these hills are the Black Mesa. To them, Big Mountain. And it is the site of much controversy, much conflict, and there is no running water or electricity in these lands. Organizers and protesters from across the country come out to this region in order to help the Dene resist their colonization. They herd off the land, live off the income, and live off well water. But the land they live on is not their own, and their sheep graze someone else's land. For a long time, this mountain has been controlled by Peabody Western Coal Company, and it has extracted its resources from the mountain. And now, they're leaving the mountain. This land is also controlled by the Hopi. Even though the Dene live here, they do not own this land. It is disputed between the two tribes, but the Hopi control it legally. But none of this belongs to any indigenous people. All of this land is held in trust by the federal government, and they are the ones who have broken the treaties to allow companies to extract the resources of the Southwest. No indigenous person is a landowner, and they are still fighting for equal rights in America.
It started with the Manhattan Project, so I don't know if we have the first date of the actual first mine. I'm sure companies were already doing exploration, probably even in the late 30s, but definitely in the early 40s. So it was mostly for weapons. It was all for weapons. For uranium mining, we can say that it started because of the Manhattan Project. But in reality, it actually goes back to the 1872 mining law. And then if you go even further back, I attribute it to the doctrine of discovery.
In 1493, Pope Alexander VI issued 3 papal bulls, and he divided the world in half through the Atlantic Ocean for Portugal to colonize and to conquer and to acquire sovereignty, jurisdiction, and title to all lands east of that line. So that was all of modern-day Africa, and later, as they found out, a lot of Asia. And Spain was granted that same rights west of that line to conquer, acquire title, sovereignty, and jurisdiction. And so Spain and Portugal, they claimed the entire world. They did not want England, France, and Holland interfering with their Vatican God-given rights to colonize the entire world. I'd like to ask you or your audience, when you say those words, what does that mean to you? We studied it a little bit in school, but what is manifest destiny? I try to prove in my book, and I think I succeed, that it's just this doctrine of discovery. It's this international law of colonialism used by the United States against Indian nations as the U.S. advanced across the continent.
Our story begins here in the New Mexico Crown Point region, where the United States stripped the land of its uranium in the efforts to win the Cold War. Many of the Native Americans who live around this region also worked the mines, and they paid so with their life. Many of the people who live in this region have experienced sickness and cancers related to the mining. Uranium is still everywhere. Hundreds of mines dot this landscape, many of which have not been cleaned up, many of which have been poorly kept. Animals get into them and bring their toxic waste to the rest of Deneta. This is a mill site where the highly radioactive isotope of uranium is separated from that of its less radioactive counterpart. When we tested the tap water of a home nearby this UNC mill site, we found 17 parts per million of uranium in the water. The safe limit is supposed to be 30.
A lot of it has to do with human health. So we've been dealing with lots of cancers, reproductive issues. It's even documented in the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. All of the impacts like thyroid disease, pulmonary fibrosis, a lot of illnesses that exist that people have, not just Diné people.
You find millions of gallons of water impacted by this type of, that could be cancerous. So when you have these carcinogens coming from the air and the water, it's affecting what people consider sacred in their land. So in Arizona, that has been a large concern. It's such a concern, but not talked about enough.
The US EPA says 523 abandoned uranium mines and 4 mills. Since the 40s, there's been hundreds of places where mining has occurred. Probably thousands of places where exploratory drilling has occurred. And so the reservation is just perforated, by the uranium and nuclear industry.
Uranium mining is, over time, it's decreased a lot. It is not as active as it used to be. Something to say with uranium mining and other types of mining as well, from the research that I've done, is there are many more health precautionary safety matters being taken place in today's world than there was when uranium mining was taking place maybe in the latter half of the 20th century.
Hi, my name is Caden Manuelito. I am from the Navajo Nation, and I am Laguna Pueblo and Navajo. My documentary covers the resilience in farming along the San Juan River. I interviewed farmers who were affected by the Gold King mine spill. The mine spill happened in 2015. It was up near Silverton, Colorado. When the spill had happened, of course, all the uranium had trickled down into the San Juan River, and that leads into the Navajo Nation on the reservation.
Not all uranium contamination is from the Soviet era. Caden Manuelito, a UNM student, covers this in her documentary, Resilience in Farming Along the San Juan River.
I did see the sludge with my own eyes. I went up to the Bonita Peak Mining District for a watershed conference, actually, and the water is very much still orange, and of course, they have their filters and everything, but it was really surprising to see that it's still there.
Right now, we're dealing with a lot of external forces trying to mine wherever they can.
The farmers were downstream. A lot of the farmers that I interviewed, they were affected by it, and a lot of them didn't farm for a good 3 to 5 years because of that. And the spill, our own government, the Navajo Nation government had said the water was fine and it was perfect to use. But a lot of the farmers, they had stated that you look at the water and it's orange. It's not good to use. And this had affected them, and, especially because they depend on that for financial stability. And when they're selling their crops, people ask, where are these crops from? And they say, Shiprock area. They don't buy it. They didn't buy for a good 5 years, and a lot of them lost revenue for that. I believe one of my farmers had stated that they lost around $9,000 in one summer.
But let me back up just one step, because the Constitution talks about the power of Congress to control commerce with the Indian nations. It's in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the Constitution. It's called the Interstate Commerce Clause, also known as the Indian Commerce Clause. That's the only specific reference to tribes in the Constitution. But how the Supreme Court has read that clause to this day is that Congress can do almost anything it wants, good or bad, to Indian nations and to Indian peoples as citizens of their nations.
In the United States, there are 7 active uranium mines and only 1 active mill. Energy Fuels owns the mill as well as this Pinon Plain mine.
So the Pinon Plain mine was originally called the Canyon Mine, and they started to apply for their license back in the 80s. I think their scoping period under NEPA started in 84, and then they were given the permit in 86. So there's a lot of people who have been fighting the mine since the mid-80s. The number one nation or number one opposition are the Havasupai. So the Havasupai tribe lives down, their traditional homelands is down in the canyon. And they also have sacred places, not just the canyon itself, but there's a place called Red Butte. And so this is not my homeland, but anyone who knows about Canyon Mine, Pinon Plain, if they know the history, they would know that this is sacred land, that there's people that have been fighting it for a long time. And their fight, unfortunately, they went through, different lawsuits and all kinds of different strategies that essentially didn't work to stop the mine.
Millions of years ago, before life even existed on Earth, Red Butte volcano was spewing its toxic magma all over the southwest. From deep within the mantle came heavy metals like uranium. Before life existed, this uranium could not go anywhere. Once life came into Earth, oxygen was able to hit the atmosphere and oxidize this uranium. Now, Red Butte is a mountain sitting above a lot of water and uranium. The natural sand filters the uranium through the ground, leaving a lot of uranium under a lot of water.
When we talked about the transport, understanding that that the Navajo Nation doesn't really have jurisdiction, we started this group, we started this campaign. Now some people call it a movement, which is Haul No. Our organization started, sometimes I call it an organization, but it's more or less a campaign. Like we do autonomous organizing. We do community organizing, and I would say we're more or less a group of activists and community organizers. We're all volunteers. None of us are paid to do this work. And we started in 2016. They announced to their stockholders and investors that they were mining in December 2023. But that first pile of uranium didn't come out of the ground until January 8th, 2024. So they started mining despite all the opposition and other, barriers like the moratorium and the monument, which had loopholes to allow the mining. And now today, they are actively mining and transporting.
The Pinon Plain uranium mine is operating inside the new national monument President Biden created last year, less than 10 miles from the Grand Canyon. The company that owns the mine, Energy Fuel, insists the material coming out of their mine has extremely low radiation levels.
Controversy surrounding the Pinon Plain uranium mine just south of the Grand Canyon.
The mine and their work has been the source of pushback from Navajo Nation, whose land is directly affected by the mine. The Navajo Nation recently updated their laws, first written 12 years ago, strengthening requirements for mining companies who transport hazardous materials like uranium across their land.
Navajo officials say this comes after the Pinon Plain mine renewed operations this year and moved shipments through the Navajo Nation in July. They're now in negotiations with the company as shipments have been paused.
With our outreach and education, we caused a lot of people to raise their voices to the Navajo Nation to demand that the Navajo Nation stop the transport. And so last year, when the transport started, the Navajo Nation president made a big show. He had this huge action. I wouldn't even call it that. He was successful in getting the governor of Arizona to pause the transport. So Governor Hobbs of Arizona had the transport stopped for 6 months pending negotiations between the tribe and Energy Fuels. There was this announcement that the transport was going to restart, which happened this February 2025. And with that announcement, we found out that the Navajo Nation actually went into business with the company. So I had a feeling something was not right. Like in August last year, August 26th, the council voted to amend the transportation law. So the law that says no transport, they changed it to say the Navajo Nation is going to regulate transport.
The only active uranium mill in the United States is in southern Utah in the Ute Nation. we interviewed a firefighter who was given a tour of this facility. They wish to remain anonymous.
The fire department went through the entire facility from where the ore gets dumped and then gets crushed. And pretty serious to know that people I know have to be Geiger counted off every day when they leave from their work. The second building we went through was just like a big open, huge warehouse where inside these big vats filled with different concentrations of chemicals. I don't know what they all were, but just huge vats, taller than me, bigger than the room. They told us, if ever this building is on fire, they told us as fire personnel, if ever this building is on fire, grab a chair and go as far away as you can and just watch this building burn.
The United States is supposed to look out for the best interest of tribal peoples and tribal nations, and that the United States has taken this duty on voluntarily. So now I've almost forgotten your question, but how has it worked out? Well, to our harm, mostly.
Apaches in eastern Arizona, they're in a desperate fight to block a massive copper mine in the Tonto National Forest. ABC 15's Claudia Rupsich and photojournalist Danny Bavaro spent several days in the area sharing in-depth reports about the controversy surrounding the project.
Before any mining can begin, there's a court fight over a land exchange that's the foundation for a project years in the making. There's concern about the copper mine destroying sacred tribal land, excessive water use, and it wiping out ecosystems full of endangered species. But supporters of the project call it a win for our state's economy.
I'm super honored to be here today with Wenzler Nosey from the San Carlos Apache tribe. He's a former councilman, a former chairman, and a longtime activist, and that's how I've known him through his work for many, many years, fighting the mining company who's trying to come in and take over Oak Flat. And so you've taken this all the way to the Ninth Circuit, right?
Well,
You're in the process.
to the District Court, Ninth Circuit, and now we're on our way to the Supreme Court.
Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So yeah, where are we at now, like exactly in this battle? What are you trying to achieve?
Well, I think like what you said earlier, to go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, this is sacred land we're talking about. And I think, for your listeners to really understand what that means, I guess using the English word, using, what people brought here, it would be in reference to the Bible when they talk about Mount Sinai, when they talk about all these very critical places that begin in the beginning of time where the Bible actually comes from. And that's no different here. That's the same thing that's here, where God touched certain parts of the world.
For the San Carlos Apache in southern Arizona, copper is just another mineral needed to sacrifice for the future energy needs of America.
It was Rio Tinto Mining or other mining companies before or after that who have sought to acquire this land and extract copper out of Oak Flat, among other metals and minerals that they've found there, from my knowledge. And the dispute is that this land within just a small section of what we would consider relatively east of Phoenix, which is but has major significance within the tribe there, they are trying to stop that from proceeding, and that's where the dispute will arise, because all of these projects, these mining projects, they require a lot of federal approval for environmental reasons, and what comes with that is looking at other significant impacts that these projects can have. So Oak Flat is one example of them. There's others taking place.
So you might get a different answer there about oil and gas than you might at San Carlos, who's trying to stop this copper mine off the reservation. But I just mentioned the San Carlos and that copper mine. That's land off their reservation. That's land that their ancestors sold, 100 years ago to the United States. And so they're bringing religious claims, cultural claims, but they don't own those lands anymore. And that severely limits what they can do to protect that land.
And then the 1872 mining law was, again, a policy to take our lands, using mining as a tool for legalized theft by extracting hard rock minerals such as gold, copper, silver, molybdenum, vanadium, uranium. And so today, that 1872 mining law is used on U.S. public lands, and it's as it was in 1872, that anyone can stake a claim in public land, and if they can prove they can mine these minerals, they only have to pay a fee of less than $10 a year, which was probably a lot in 1872, but they don't have to pay royalties. And so a lot of our fights today, Oak Flat, anything around the Grand Canyon, right now new mining is proposed on Mount Taylor. You know, a lot of these were pushed by 1872 mining law, which was by design to expand the United States, to, forward manifest destiny, etc.
When you bring in indigenous lands into the conversation of extracting natural resources, one would be remiss not to include the topic of sacred lands. And that, in the end, is up to the tribes, and they have to have those intercommunications to decide what the best thing to do is with their land. And Oak Flat's a great representation of it, and it's not going to be easy. Those are things, that's why it does get the law gets very involved, history gets very involved, and politics, but there's going to be a lot of gray area, and I think having those communications, negotiations, and understanding of history and place in society in these communities is at the forefront of that. Very important.
History is a different story. When you've lost a battle or you're starving to death, and here comes the military and they force you to go live somewhere. Yeah, I mean, what happened to San Carlos and other tribes, I'm not an expert on their history, but somehow that Oak Flat did not end up in their reservation, so it greatly diminishes what their power is to control it.
Dr. Winsler Nosey has led the fight for Oak Flat for a very long time, famously leading against Senator John McCain, who reopened the mine. A permanent encampment now exists at Oak Flat to ensure the Apache never lose claim again.
So here in Arizona, the Navajo Nation, Hopi, and other tribes fought to try to protect the Snow Bowl, to stop the Snow Bowl ski resort from putting recycled water and snow on that mountain, which I'm blanking on the name of the mountain. And they lost those cases because of Ling. And so I'm very pessimistic about I hate to even say this, I don't like saying this on tape, I'm very pessimistic about what will happen with the Oak Flat case.
Right now, students across the nation are occupying their college campuses. Here at UNM, the pack is gathering at the duck pond.
We're hoping to hold this space as long as we can because we want to make it very visible that we are for a free Palestine. And we want to make it very visible that we are also creating space for students and creating mutual aid for community to be able to access, and spaces where we can gather as a community, both students and community members who are non-students.
First, start by saying Yat-A. My name is Siasen, and I'm Dene. And I like to name that my people have been in struggle and in encampments throughout our existence for time immemorial. And a lot of indigenous people's communities function in a very communal way. So these types of encampments are pretty familiar for us because we are used to having to work together. We are used to having to coordinate with one another to make ceremonial things or cultural practices happen.
My family, we are relocatees. We were forcefully relocated in the early to mid 80s, late 70s. Due to the Peabody coal mine in a region that is known as Black Mesa region and Beck Mountain region, where we had an extractive industry by the name of Peabody Coal seek to extract coal from underneath us. And so my family was one of the first families to be relocated. The barbed wire fence that was put between the two tribal communities, Navajo Nation and Hopi Pueblo, went in the middle of our living room. So our home was bulldozed within 30 days that barbed wire fence had been created.
Black Mesa, also known as Big Mountain, is disputed territory between the Dene and the Hopi, two tribes that seem to not get along for a very long time. And right now, Peabody Coal believes that this mountain belongs to the Hopi, and so do they. But the Dene who live on top of this region herd the sheep at their own risk. A sheep jail exists to arrest any animals that might be wandering too far from home.
My name is Jerome Untilly. I'm from Kings Canyon, a small area, small reservation called Jedito Island.
We have the Hopi Nation right inside of Navajo, and then inside the Hopi Nation we have Jedito, another island.
And the fences around here, we're like circled inside a fence. We're like fenced in. We can't have no horses, sheep, cattle. We only have like 2 or 1, 3, 4 here and there. Not more than 10.
Well, Congress has passed a law or two about the Navajo-Hopi issue. I'm no expert on those subjects. It continues to be a mess today, as you just said.
To understand how a coal company could have expelled Sahassen's family and encircled Jerome's, you need to first understand how indigenous land law works. They do not own the land like most Americans. They are not equal citizens.
Because we never owned the land, and so right now, the reservation is held in trust, and it's communally held, so nobody owns the land.
And so in Johnson v. McIntosh, the court defines very clearly that Indian peoples have the right to live on, occupy is the word Johnson uses, and to farm and to use the land as long as they're still in existence, as long as the United States hasn't either conquered it from them or bought it from them in a treaty.
Colonialism has not ended. Settler colonialism is alive and well, and we can see it today in the way that indigenous systems, lifeways, and even structures are being demolished.
Way back in the past, there was no such thing as reservation. There was no such thing reservation at then. Who made reservation? Western civilization, the white people, huh? And now listen to them. They want to build that. They're building that wall. Commotion. People are fighting over there, killing each other because of a wall. We should say us natives should have built that wall first for no white people to climb over, huh?
What do tribes still own? Most of your audience has probably heard of the phrase trust lands, Indian trust lands. What does that mean? That means the United States is the legal owner of Indian lands, tribally owned, and some individual Indians, and the tribal nation, or the individual Indian, is the beneficial owner. That's what we call it in American property law. Your parents could own land for your benefit, and when you were under 18, they would have to be the legal owner. But you would be the beneficial owner, like if your grandparents had left you some property, and then only when you finally reached adulthood would that guardianship of your parents go away. Well, this guardianship relationship of the United States to Indian nations is never going to go away.
I learned right here. I own this place right here.
No, I'm under the impression that while natives own land, all the arrangements are leasing. Is that correct?
Mine is written on paper, leased and everything. So I owned about close to 4 acres. All the houses where I do my ceremonies.
Does the government have any claim over that? Do they ever say that this is federal land?
I haven't heard that yet. We were boys back then. Me and my brother next to me. They had a dispute down there in Kings Canyon by the post office. Hopi's one side, Dene on one side, going at each other. Hopi Rangers, FBI, Navajo police, everybody involved. Everybody, big commotion going on, about to fight. And some of them get handcuffed, to each other. So one of them won't take off. They handcuffed them to each other.
What were they fighting over?
The land. The sign that used to be there. That sign down there used to say Navajo Agency. But now it says Hopi Agency. All these signs around here are turning into Hopi Agency. And to this day, we moved a lot too. Because of land disputes, land. People talking about land. Neighbors here and there.
Did you lose any neighbors?
Yeah, a lot. Down in the canyon.
What happened to them?
Passed away from working down the coal mines. Cancer. There's coal down there. That's what they see down there. That's what they want. That's what we're sitting on.
The United States had what's called federal Indian periods. So removal, which was basically extermination, and then relocation. So these were actual policy periods. And so going forward, assimilation, boarding school.
Born, raised here, went to a boarding school, went to high school, finished high school. Then I started practicing medicine. And now to this day they say, they put up boarding schools and they say to us, you can't speak your language. You got to learn white man's language. For what? We're not white. We're Tene. How God made us. Huh? They try to make us talk white man's language. And they even give us soap, wash our mouth out so we can talk English. Which was stupid. Huh? It's already up here.
Did people do that to you growing up teaching?
In boarding school. I went to a boarding school called Toye. It's a boarding school where you stayed over there 5 days and get to go home on Saturday and Sunday. That's where they had the education board too. A big board where you say one Navajo word, they hold your hand, they hit you with that board. They call it education board. BIA education board. Used to swipe our butts with it. Our hand. And if you were really mean to them, they probably smack you in the face, in the head. Huh? That's how we were treated in boarding schools. They cut my hair in boarding school. After that, I left there. I made it long, and I keep it long. Never cut it. All my brothers have long hair.
We've always accepted guests in our territories. We've always adopted people who are willing to steward and care for the land and adhere to our practices of how we steward the land. And if people are willing to do that, we've always been an accepting people. And I think that's also why we're still here today.
We're still here. We're still people, that we go, of course, we get looked over all the time. And a lot of the issues we face, they're so belittled.
I like being Native, who I am. I can't be anybody else. That's why I don't wear tattoos. I'm not a Vato. I don't know how to be a Vato, but I just be myself. I'm good. It is hard to be alone when all your relatives are gone. I miss them, but I was told not to cry after them. I was told to let them rest in peace. And I don't go to graveyards. I leave that alone. I was told not to. I respect what I have. I respect my dad and my mom, what they gave me. My uncle, what he gave me. And I just try to go by what I have. Feel that rain, feel that snow, feel the wind, because that's all the people that you miss. My parents used to say that. Feel that snow. Take off your clothes and crawl in there. That's what I do. Feel that rain, run out there with your shortcuts. Bless myself with the rain. Say, I miss you guys. I know you're in the heavens. I know I feel you down here. That's what I do. That's why I'm okay down here, I say. I let them know up there I'm okay. I'm still here.